Good morning, Ashi, Dhwani, and Vishantan.
Morning.
At the class, पहले मुझे ये बताओ कि anybody, I don't know, just three of you are here, but do you want any kind of a doubt clearing session tomorrow towards the end of the class, 15-20 minutes, or are the topics clear to you?
We're pretty much.
Clear. Okay. And there is now I hope there's no confusion as to where do you get the reference material and stuff. I mean, I said follow Prescott blindly. Okay, so that is I confirmed from Ashi, and she said that's available to all of you. So I don't think there are any further questions about minor. I mean, inform you before uh, I can give you the of instructions, and then you will log on to whatever platform that I select. Okay. Um,
Ma'am, will it be for 1 hour or 2 hours?
I think it'll be less than 1 hour, Vishantan. I'm really not sure.
Okay.
Once I make the paper, only then I'll be sure about the kind of time that I would like to assign. Okay.
Okay.
I guess it's of 25
Ma'am,
marks.
it will be subjective, right?
It will be, it might be mixed also, Dhwani. I mean, subjective does not mean I need paragraphs and paragraphs to be written. But yes, of course, it will not be simply multiple choice or true and false and something. I mean, it will either be a mix or completely short answers. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, fine. um, क्या कर रहे थे लास्ट क्लास में हम लोग? कोई बताएगा मुझे?
आइसोलेशन कर रहे थे।
आइसोलेशन कर रहे थे, ठीक है. So, what I've tried to explain to you are the different means by which you can either isolate a culture from a mixed culture, or even check for purity of a culture that you think is a pure culture. You can understand the industrial implication of the methods that we talked about, and whether it is growing it in a broth or it is growing on a plate. I try to explain to you the advantages and disadvantages of all the techniques, including the difference between spread plate, streaking, and pour plate. So after having done that, once you have a culture in your hand, you would not like to repeat the isolation process. You would want to have a method in hand to preserve this interest, this organism of interest. So, what is important is that you select a method for preservation of cultures. This is a very short PPT, just 5 or 6 slides, and then we'll move on to the final topic, which is to be covered before the minor. The preservation of culture, it has, besides biotechnological applications, like I mentioned, you would definitely not want to re-isolate things and start the entire process once you have struck upon an interesting organism. But even otherwise, for academic purposes, for research purposes, for even for cataloging diversity, you need to maintain a culture bank. So we'll be talking about some methods involved in preservation of cultures. Um, when I say storage or preservation, how do you determine that the preservation or the storage has been effective? Well, of course, the first point is that it has to be free of contamination. So that is when you call it an effective storage. But the other point here is that during storage, there should be no change in the genotypic and the phenotypic characteristics during this entire duration of storage. So, why do you think this might happen during storage? Any idea? Genotypic, phenotypic characteristics क्यों change कर जाएंगे? Anyone? If you're storing it, what can be the source of changes in their morphology, whether it is genotype in its genetic material, subsequently in
इसमें एक बार दोबारा क्वेश्चन।
I'm saying this is one of the parameters, right? That you don't want a culture to change its genotype or phenotype, its genetic makeup, or its the characteristics that it exhibits. Why would you? Where is the source of changes in genotype or phenotype?
जीनोटिपिक के लिए तो जीन्स में अगर कोई मतलब ऐसा ऑर्गेनिज्म आ जाए जो दूसरा जिसकी वजह से क्रॉसिंग ओवर हो जाए जीन्स में।
वो तो है नहीं ना, वो तो प्योर कल्चर है आपके पास, आपने तो प्योर कल्चर स्टोर किया है ना, इफेक्ट ऑफ कंटामिनेशन क्या है?
इंटरनल म्यूटेशन
सॉरी क्या?
खुद से म्यूटेट हो गया
फिर म्यूटेट वो कब करेगा भव्या?
एनवायरनमेंट चेंज की वजह से।
Okay, good, very nice. So actually, if a
Can
cell
we
is
say
divided,
because
Vishantan, please go ahead.
can we say it's because of some sort of like plasmid activation, like the plasmids were inactive like earlier and then they activated.
Okay. ठीक है, point taken. So basically, storage में you want a condition wherein the cells don't divide. Okay, because if the cells divide, they would be accumulating mutations or changes in their genotype, or they will be, like you said, they might even acquire or lose plasmids, thereby changing the genotypic or phenotypic characteristics. This is completely undesirable. This is not what you want in an effective storage. So a storage means a storage method has to be, of course, it should keep it away from any kind of contamination, but then you have to place the organisms in a state of minimal activity so that they do not grow, or that is minimized. Growth and multiplication is minimized. It is then that you can be sure that no changes to the genetic makeup has been accumulated, which would then lead to phenotypic changes. So this is one of the prime criteria that you have to consider when you store microorganisms. Then there's something called stock cultures. Stock cultures are microbial cultures which are held in a reserve. So in a collection for relatively long-term preservation. Usually you find, I'm not sure if some of you know that there are world recognized culture banks wherein long-term storage of stocks are done, and any scientist or any other person requiring it for research or even for any industrial application can actually procure the cultures from such long-term preservation banks. Now, stock cultures, they, as you can understand, must possess prolonged viability as compared to working culture. Working culture is something that you always keep on using in the lab, and so that does not require such a longer period of preservation. From the growth lecture that you've studied, from the isolation lecture that I have given, you understand that if you want to minimize the growth, the easiest possible thing is to, let's say, cut down the supply of oxygen. If it's an aerobe or even a microaerophile, you can just cut down the oxygen and the microorganisms will be able to thrive or go into a state of dormancy or minimal growth and reproduction. And the other important strategy that is followed for preservation is that you remove water. So because you understand that water is the medium for a number of enzymatic and non-enzymatic reactions. So if these two are primarily used, you either cut down oxygen or you remove water, and you can preserve your microorganisms for a long time. Now, when you want to maintain a culture, especially in the lab, you will see that, tell me.
It's easier while keeping it free from contamination, but while adding the inoculant, I mean, it isn't like we can have a sterile environment. There are going to be other bacteria in the environment. How are we going to add precisely one bacteria or prevent the
So the
others from
first
entering?
point, yeah, okay, Dhwani. So the first point was isolation, right? That we covered in the last class. From there, it is clear, I guess it's clear that you first find out the organism of your interest and maintain a culture which is just that. It's a pure culture, right? Pure culture, समझ में आ रहा है ना?
Yes, ma'am. But even last time we talked about adding a specific bacteria. I mean, initially trying to add a specific bacteria. Isn't that hard
नहीं
in the
नहीं
first
नहीं
place?
नहीं. Excuse me. I think there's some confusion. Adding a single bacteria. When did we cover this?
I mean, not exactly that, but like when we were adding a bacteria with the help of any device, like in streaking on anything, I know
Uh,
we were trying to uh, come up with a single colony, but
correct.
even in that case, we were trying to
It is a
isolate that
routine
bacteria
procedure
by.
now. Yeah. So it is a routine procedure now, Dhwani. It is not as complicated as you think it is. So once you have a mixed culture, whenever you say you would like to produce, let's say the enzyme lipase, it's going to be one bacterium that produces it, right? Or if you're going to produce an antibiotic, let's say, or cheese, probiotic strain, whatever the case be, you're talking about one bacterium. Hence, I said in the last class, the need to isolate, right? So once you have isolated, I mean, when you talked about, if you remember the spread plate or the pour plate method, not the streaking part, the spread plate and pour plate give you a chance to separate out different bacteria, and you can easily observe the morphotype, select a particular colony. Once you're working with one colony, it is understood or assumed that it is one cell giving rise to that colony. So that has to be a pure culture, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Hannah, once you have, this is the reason why I said you would not like to repeat the entire process of isolation. What you want is that if you get a microbe of your interest, it is extremely important for you to have a preservation method or a storage method in hand so that that particular organism is stored for further use. Okay, and the idea of today's lecture is to give you those some they're just limited number of techniques which are used for storing these organisms. Okay, so the entire microbial industry is based on the first step of isolation, then preservation and using them. And it might happen that you would, in fact, towards the end of the lecture, I was going to tell you that even if you preserve a culture, once you are to start something of commercial importance or a batch culture or even a fresh continuous culture, you need to check for the contamination again before you really use that culture, which you assume as a pure culture, to check if it's free from contamination. Okay, I'm not sure if I've been able to answer your question. I see.
Yes, ma'am.
ध्वनि और जो जितने हमने तरह के मीडियम बताए थे ना, use that particular medium for have I lost you all? Can you see the slides, students?
Yes, ma'am. We cannot see the slide. We can see your screen.
Here. Okay, I need to reshare then. अब दिख रहा है?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Annie, did I answer you satisfactorily?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I guess it'll be clearer in the lab.
In the lab, yes, because I think now it's very difficult for you to imagine what, maybe I can show you a video or something later wherein you see how it happens, or maybe I'll post a video wherein you can see it happening. Okay. That will probably give you. So if you remember, I don't have the PPT right now. If you remember, there were plates with different kinds of morphology, right? Different kinds of colonies growing, and you understand this is why you always count in terms of not cells but colony forming units. This I mentioned in the last class, because what you are observing or counting is just the colonies which you assume have been generated from one cell. Okay. So you pick one colony and you call it as a pure culture. And then, of course, to be doubly sure or maybe validate it again, you can streak it. Is it possible that if you have a culture in on a spread plate, if you find a colony and you streak it, does it give you a fairer chance to estimate if it's a pure culture? Dhwani?
Yes, ma'am, definitely it does. Because we initially already assumed that it was a pure culture in the first place. So yeah.
Correct. Yes. So what happens is, if you really are interested in a particular organism for a commercial purpose or an industrial application, you perform this repeatedly. You isolate a bacteria on spread plate, then you put it into a liquid medium, let the numbers grow, because that's what I told you was the purpose of liquid media, wherein you allow them to grow to a number which is detectable. Again, streak it, pick up another colony from the streak plate, again put it into a liquid broth, just to be sure that you have only a pure culture which you would then like to inoculate into your batch culture for production of XYZ. Okay? And you would like to, for such a culture, you would like to maintain a stock culture. This is the meaning of stock culture. Okay? So that repeated isolation is not performed. Okay, then let's move ahead. I was talking about methods wherein you can maintain culture. Come across these agar slants and agar stabs, which are used to usually maintain the working cultures. The slant is when the melted agar is placed inclined, so that once it solidifies, you will see that it has a slant like this. And here basically it provides an increased surface area. So with an inoculating loop, you can then inoculate the bacteria of interest or the microorganism of interest and then seal the tube. ध्वनि, तुम्हारा क्वेश्चन था कि ये कैसे कंटामिनेशन फ्री होगा. जब आपके पास एक प्योर कल्चर हाथ में है तो फिर आप उसको, there are several methods by which you can seal and try to see that there is no further contamination from the environment. Okay, where you store them, how you store them, all that is important. Okay. Okay, so you see a growth of this sort on the surface, and the idea is, instead of storing plates which might take a larger space, such storage in small tubes saves space. But the disadvantage here compared to a plate is that you will not be able to observe a contamination. So this entire surface will be flooded with microorganisms. It will be a lawn on the surface. However, there will be no morphotypic differences that will be observable. So such a method is used for storage starting from weeks to months. Like I said, it's a short-term method of storage. And the other method is the stab method, that is the agar stab preparation, wherein you push the inoculating needle, just like you saw in the semi-solid media. You push the inoculating needle with the inoculum into the tube and then seal it. So here there is limited oxygen exposure. Basically, it's cut down for the subsurface organisms. And bacteria can be stored, some of the bacteria can even be stored for about 1 to 2 years by this method. But again, it's normally used for just weeks of storage. Working culture ke liye you use both slants and stabs. There are other methods of preservation. There are other short-term methods of preservation. The simplest method, of course, is to maintain the short-term viability by subculturing it, which I just mentioned. So you take it from you transfer the inoculum from a freshly grown culture to a fresh medium, and you keep doing it over a period of time, say let's every 2-3 days or 4 days. But this, you can understand, is going to be very tedious, and so the cultures in regular use are stored by subculturing. But again, here the major disadvantage, something that we talked about in the last slide, was that repeated generations will increase the likelihood of mutations, and this might even be undesirable changes. So subculturing is something that you do only when you're working with a culture very often in the lab. Then agar cultures can be maintained or stored by overlaying them with mineral oil to a depth of about 1 centimeter. हाँ बोलो, what is the question? Gopika. Gopika, do you have a question?
No, ma'am.
अच्छा, तुमने unmute किया था, ठीक है. So yeah, another short-term method is कि culture पे you've overlaid mineral oil, तो you are cutting down on the oxygen supply, and there is no loss of water. Hence, there's slowing down of growth of microorganisms or the culture in the broth. The growth can be slowed down by simply storing the cultures in tubes or in agar plates at lower temperatures, like in the fridge. But again, in all these cases, the cells are growing and the nutrients will exhaust together with accumulation of toxics. So eventually there will be death of cells. This is why all these methods are short term. In some of the cases, the cells are dried in vacuum and then kept in fridges to again bring down the activity. And this is mostly used for fungi and some spore forming bacteria, wherein they can tolerate a drying phase as well. For long-term preservation, freezing is an efficient technique. In fact, as a general rule, the colder the storage temperature, the longer the culture will retain. Depending on the temperature, there can be 3 different types of freezers. There can be laboratory freezers, there can be ultra low freezers, and there can be cryogenic freezers. The major problem in freezing live cells is the adverse impact that is caused due to the formation of, and ice can I have a pause? It's showing a bad network on my side. Can one of you tell me if you can hear me and if the recording is on?
Yes,
Ma'am,
ma'am.
we can
Ma'am,
hear
we can hear
you.
you. And the recording is on.
Oh, okay, perfect. Because here it shows bad network. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, so I was talking about the problems involved in freezing the live cells. So like I said, the formation of ice crystals can damage the cell integrity. Ice can also damage cells by dehydration caused by localized increases in salt concentration. Converted to ice, there is high concentration and denatured biomolecules. Of course, the crystals can break the membranes. Like I said, it can rupture the membrane, and this is often of more concern when you're talking of cells which lack a cell wall, mostly even animal cells, but that is not within our purview right now. To lessen the negative effects of freezing, some cryoprotectants are added before freezing. So, for example, glycerol or DMSO. These are cryoprotectants which prevent the minimum the effect of formation of ice crystal. And glycerol is in fact produced by many fishes and insects to defend against cold temperature by bringing down the freezing point of the cells, enhancing supercooling and protection from ice. With bacteria, adding glycerol to a final concentration of about 15% helps the cells to remain viable even under freezing conditions. Now, when you talk about laboratory freezers, which bring down the temperature from -20 to approximately to -40, that is the range of laboratory freezers, the bacteria can be stored for a moderate period of time. When I say moderate, I mean, let's say 1 or 2 years. This is inexpensive and it's found in most of the labs. It's kind of a requirement in every lab dealing with cultures. The next is ultra low, which brings down the temperature to approximately -80. These are more expensive than the normal laboratory freezers. But here, of course, like I said, as the temperature goes down, the cells can be stored for a longer time. However, even in this case, molecular motion still occurs in frozen cells. So the viability will decline over a period of time, though this might range from 5 to 10 years. You can easily store your culture. So the most sophisticated one are the cryogenic freezers, which have a temperature ranging from -130 to -150 degrees centigrade, wherein the molecular motion is completely halted. So it you can even store cultures for up to like -15. I mean, sorry, 2 decades or something. But again, the downside here is that it is the most expensive, and any kind of power outage is detrimental. So you can understand that you're going to lose the entire bank or the cultures that you have if there is any kind of mechanical failure or any kind of electrical failure. What we normally do in lab is to halt the molecular motions and to actually take a snapshot of the system or the cells at a particular time. We plunge the culture vials, these small tubes in which the culture is supplemented with glycerol in liquid nitrogen. And this instantly freezes the cells, and then we store them either in laboratory conditions or laboratory freezers or in ultra low freezers. Now, another commonly used method, and this is also one of the relatively most popular method, is freeze drying or lyophilization. Now, because water serves as the medium for enzymatic reactions and non-enzymatic reactions, what the purpose here is removing water without the concerns of ice formation. So what is done here is to freeze the cells in a medium that contains a lyoprotectant, which is usually sucrose or even skimmed milk, and then pull out the water using vacuum. So by sublimation, if you see, there's first freeze solidification and then sublimation. There is no. This is laborious and it requires a specialized equipment, but it has the advantage of generating stock cultures without the disadvantages like a power outage or an empty nitrogen tank. Here the cultures, it is in the freeze dried or the lyophilized form that you will find cultures being transported or routinely shipped. Even when you get a culture from a culture bank, it is usually in the form of a freeze dried sample. But there are some bacteria which might not be able to survive this stress. So not all bacteria can be lyophilized. There are certain bacteria which are quite sensitive to the process. So yeah, so having told you about these methods of both short-term and long-term preservation, again, I would like to emphasize that however long you store your sample, once you start using it for an experiment or for the production of a particular compound of interest, you should always check the purity of the culture before you start the experiment or before you start your any process of interest. So if there are any doubts with respect to this, because that is the end of preservation, and I would like to move on to control now. If there's a doubt, let me know, students. I guess not. So let me just share the other PPT first. When I say controlling microorganisms, what is it that you understand, students? Bolo? What do you understand by controlling control of microbial growth? What does that mean? नमन सिंह निर्वाण आज बताएंगे. नमन अनम्यूट करना जरा. क्यों साइन इन कर लेते हो तुम लोग? हाँ, क्या जरूरत है? दीपक जहांगीर.
Ma'am, preserve microbes so we can use them whenever we need them. Like control their growth so they not divide more and and they stay in a healthy culture, healthy environment. So like stopping their dividing rate means they remain at a in constant concentration. So whenever we need them, we took some sample and then we can culture them.
Hmm. Good, Deepak. Um, in microbiology, when you talk of controlling microorganism or controlling microbial growth, you mean to inhibit or to prevent the growth of microorganism. And yes, Deepak, you're right that, but this is when you talk of control, it is not for preservation. There are situations wherein you would like to control the growth. In many practical situations, you require this. That is inhibition and prevention of microorganisms. For example, what Dhwani pointed out in the last this thing, the PPT that I was sharing, that you have to, how do you maintain an environment which is free from microorganisms? So probably this PPT will also help you understand that. Let me just come to. So the most obvious importance of controlling microorganisms is, of course, to prevent transmission of diseases and microbial infections. Then inhibiting microorganisms is a crucial step in the food industry to stop decomposition and spoilage. And again, even for academic and research activities in the lab, it is desirable to have minimal microbial load so as to avoid any contamination. So this entire topic is about what could be the means by which microbial growth or the presence itself of microorganisms is minimized and controlled, that is inhibited. Uh, this is just an interesting study that I found wherein they've compared the microbial load on different parts of the interior of a car. The importance of controlling microorganisms was understood when microbiology started. Okay, but even before that, there are certain ancient practices which unintentionally credit to introducing disinfection in healthcare sector is actually attributed to the father of modern surgery, Joseph Lister, who reduced the incidence of wound infection, which was a very common occurrence during his time. And this he did by introduction of antiseptic surgery using carbolic acid, which is a phenol. So in fact, what he's initiated was phenol being sprayed around the operating room by a sprayer. Besides, I'm sure that you're all aware of the process of pickling, which is a process followed for ages now. It is a means to protect food from microbial spoilage using salt, usually sodium chloride, or oil, or even sugar. And this is called as salting or salt curing or sugar curing. क्या होता है इसमें? Salt, sugar, या oil, how does that help in preventing microbial growth or preventing spoilage? Anybody?
कंसंट्रेशन ज़्यादा होती है तो माइक्रोब्स का जो इंटरनल फ्लूइड है वो बाहर आ जाता है तो वो मर जाता है.
करेक्ट. तो सॉल्ट एंड शुगर से जैसा आपने देखा था ऑस्मोलाइट कॉन्सेंट्रेशन कैसे अफेक्ट करता है. द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट मैकेनिज्म ऑफ कोर्स इज dehydration by simple osmosis. It draws available water from the food to the outside, leading to a reduction of the water activity. And this is one of the reasons, one of the points that I mentioned कि oxygen cut down कर दो या फिर डिहाइड्रेट कर दो, वाटर अवेलेबल ही नहीं है एंजाइमेटिक या नॉन एंजाइमेटिक रिएक्शंस के लिए, तो हॉल्ट हो जाएगा मेटाबॉलिज्म. Another possible antimicrobial mechanism of salt and sugar is the interference with a microbe's enzyme activity, as well as even weakening DNA. Further, sugar may also provide an indirect means of preservation in certain cases by facilitating the accumulation of antimicrobial compounds during growth of certain organisms. So for example, if you're using yeast for the production of ethanol from sugar, You know that there are, so ethanol is an antimicrobial, so it will prevent further contamination by other organisms. That is one mechanism. You know that in all this process, when you're talking about salt, addition of salt and preventing microorganisms, by now you are aware of halophiles or salt-loving bacteria as well, which require a high concentration of salt. So these are the causal organisms which can still spoil food despite being salted. When we talk of controlling microorganisms, we have to understand that there are in fact an array of microbial life forms with varying resistance to different control agents. So while the most susceptible ones are the vegetative cells, you will notice that some of the pathogens are higher up in the scale, like Staph aureus, like Pseudomonas, and even Mycobacterium. And endospores, they are the sturdy ones which can even evade a range of antimicrobial agents, hence they are higher up in the scale. I'm not sure if you notice this, gram positives are less resistant compared to the gram negative. Anything that you can think of? Why would this be the case? Gram positives being more susceptible. कोई कुछ सोच सकता है?
Ma'am, gram positives have a larger peptidoglycan concentration, which is why I think they're easily targeted by penicillin, so therefore the resistance.
Yes, but that is about a very specific antimicrobial agent that acts on the cell wall, right? In general, they are believed to be more susceptible to antimicrobials. Any idea that you can think of? ग्राम नेगेटिव्स क्यों ज्यादा रोबस्ट हैं? ऐसा नहीं है कि बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग है, लेकिन ग्राम पॉजिटिव्स के कंपैरिजन में तो डेफिनेटली दे आर मोर रेजिस्टेंट. ठीक है, फूड you can go through the reasons if you find any in the literature. Again, before we actually take up this topic, there are certain terms which I wish to introduce to you, which are often confusing and they're sometimes even used as synonyms. Sterilization means destruction or removal of all life forms, okay? So when you say you're sterilizing a surface, or sterilizing a media, you are actually removing even the endospores. In commercial sense, sterilization, the process is considered to be effective when there is sufficient heat treatment to kill endospores of Clostridium botulinum. This is kind of an indicator where in the commercial scale you say something is sterilized when the endospores are killed. Disinfection, a very common term now. Disinfection is when you destroy the vegetative pathogens. Okay, vegetative pathogens. You're not concerned about the other organisms, just the vegetative. So here it is different from sterilization in the sense that the spores are not affected. And antisepsis is the destruction of vegetative pathogen but on living tissue. So usually disinfection is for inanimate objects, while antisepsis is for animate substance. So if you apply something on the skin, it's antisepsis. Then degerming is removal of microbes from only a limited area. For example, if there is a skin around an injection site very near to a wound that you clean, that's called degerming. And sanitization is the treatment intended to lower down microbial counts on anything from food or from the workplace to safe public health levels. Their levels, they do not talk about pathogenic versus non-pathogenic, it's just bringing down the microbial load. Now, I would like you to ask me if there's a confusion here, because these are actually terms which are confusing. So I hope it's now clear that sterilization is when there is complete wipe out of vegetative as well as endospore, while all the other terms that I just talked about, whether it is disinfection, antisepsis, degerming or sanitization, they are all meant to only bring down the load. They are not touching upon the endospores. मतलब कंप्लीट स्टेरिलाइजेशन तभी होगी जब स्पोर्स भी नहीं है, ठीक है. So if you have sterilized a medium, that means if you let it stay, there will be absolutely no growth of any culture. ठीक है, no turbidity. समझ में आया यहाँ पे? आप डिसइंफेक्शन एंटीसेप्सिस में डिफरेंस समझ में आ गया? एक एनिमेट के लिए है, एक इनएनिमेट ऑब्जेक्ट्स के लिए है. कोई मुझे बोलेगा? ऋतुराज तुम्हें समझ में आया?
Yes, ma'am.
ठीक है, गोपिका, you were telling something?
Yes, ma'am. I'm not very clear about the difference between commercial sterilization and sterilization. They're both killing endospores, right?
Commercial sterilization में बस आप एक marker include करते हो to be sure that you are sterilization मतलब you're removing everything, vegetative cells and spores. Commercial sterilization में there's just an indicator by which it says yes, sterilization is done. Lab में जब आप करते हो sterilization तो आप सिर्फ कोई particular, you don't use indicators, okay? But you can understand कि commercial scale में it is of utmost importance that the sterilization has been efficient. ठीक है? So here you say something is sterilized only when this indicators endospores are killed. Is that okay, Gopika?
Yes, all right. Thank you.
I hope it's clear then for others as well. Now, the control agents that you use can be of three types based on their effect on the microbes. There are cidal agents, which inhibit the growth of cells, which kill the cells. Basically, I'm going to talk about how it's different from lytic in a minute. While there are also static agents which only inhibit the growth without killing the cells. Okay, so static and cidal are different in the sense that, of course, the suffix says it's static and here it is cidal, which is killing. The green curve that you see is for viable cell count and the red one is for total cell count. Okay, so cellular targets and are not removed by dilution, they kill the cell. The dead cells are, however, not destroyed, and total cell numbers, which you can see by the turbidity of the culture, it remains constant. So if the arrow indicates the application of the control agent, whatever the control agent be, we'll talk about it, you will notice that in a bacteriostatic case, the turbidity remains constant while the viable cell count is also constant because they are only halting the growth of the cells and thereby the division. However, in cidal, while the total cell count does not go down, because even if there is a decrement in the viable cell count, the cells have not, they still maintain their integrity. So the turbidity will be constant. And in contrast to this, there are bacteriolytic agents which, for example, antibiotics that inhibit cell wall synthesis, or there are chemicals which disturb the cytoplasmic membrane. In this case, the turbidity will go down because the cell loses its integrity. Okay, so this is the difference between cidal and lytic. Both are killing the cells, but in the case of cidal, the cell integrity is maintained, or at least for some period of time. And in bacteriolytic, you will see that because it affects on the membrane, the cell start losing all its components, and the cell loses it because the cell loses its integrity. Okay?
Ma'am, I had a question.
हाँ, पूछो.
Like, how do you kill a cell without making it lose its integrity?
Okay, so let's say you destroy the DNA polymerase, which is replicating a cell's DNA. You specifically target the DNA polymerase, this enzyme which helps in DNA replication. तो क्या होगा?
It won't replicate,
है ना?
Yeah.
But the cell's integrity is maintained, right?
Ma'am, but
the cell will age and die.
Okay. Ma'am, but won't the cell wall and membrane break afterwards?
Why? Yes, that's why I said for a particular period of time, है ना? For a particular period of time, the cell's integrity is not being affected. तो तुम्हें टर्बिडिटी में डिक्लाइन नहीं दिखाई देगा, लेकिन द सेल इज अनेबल टू डिवाइड.
Okay, okay.
Correct, that is what I meant. ठीक है. Or and if the agent is targeting directly, just give me a minute, Dhwani. If it is directly affecting the membrane, it is going to lose its integrity. सारा cell components आ जाएगा, है ना? It will be like.
Yes, ma'am. I was just asking, what exactly did you mean by the cell will age and die in bacterial cells?
If
Because
yeah, okay. So any cell will have limited potential, right? It will not be unless, so when I said cell bacteria are immortal, I said immortal, I mean in one of the earlier classes, because one cell divides into two and so on and so forth. At a particular one cell cannot survive more than a period of time. It will be accumulating, for example, reactive oxygen species or various other toxics, right? So it has a lifespan. If it does not divide, it's going to be it's mortal. Okay, there will be even programmed deaths. In fact, programmed deaths की तुम्हें हमने उसमें भी बात की थी, अगर growth curve याद हो तो, कि programmed death actually helps the other microorganisms of the same population to benefit from the dead cells. The dead cells will lose nutrients, the live one, the still live one would pick up these nutrients. So there is in a population a programmed death. ठीक है, तो अगर एक सेल
yeah, so in humans we hear there's this Hayflick limit of somatic cells. So in bacteria, since they have this immortality simply because they have circular DNA and there can possibly be no telomerase shortening. That is literally how they tapped immortality.
No. It is not that it can grow indefinitely. If it is growing, there has to be a point, there's a critical point where it has to then divide. Right? It cannot keep on accumulating things. There is a limit to it, right? तुमने तो टेलोमेयर वाला बोल दिया ना, वो तो एक मैकेनिज्म है जो कि यूकैरियोट्स में है, right? With this linear chromosome and stuff. If you are assuming that just because of circular chromosome they are immortal, is that the case, Dhwani?
Yes, for me it was because since they can divide infinitely.
They can divide indefinitely, right? For that reason, the telomere shortening is not there because there's a circular chromosome. This is one perspective that you're telling, right? But in this case, wherein Vishantan asked what can be an antimicrobial agent, and I said that if the DNA replication is stopped, do you think a cell will continue? It will not. So let's say it will continue growing.
No, not that. Not.
हाँ, तो तुम इस context में नहीं, Vishantan.
Really clear how it I mean now I am clear about how it wouldn't grow, but initially I didn't really understand why it wouldn't.
And तुमको ये भी पता है कि as time proceeds, the genetic the genetic mutations will also keep accumulating, which will be damaging. ठीक है, तो cellular damage तो है ही, जो metabolism हो रहा है उससे cellular damage हो रहा है, cells are not growing, okay, and of course the genetic changes that might occur. ठीक है. But this was specifically answering Vishantan's question. Ashi, bolo.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask you, you spoke about the programmed cell death. How does the programmed cell death or apoptosis occur in this particular case?
It is not called as apoptosis. It is not, so you cannot compare it with a eukaryotic program. But why I say so, there is always in the environment a critical limit for a particular population. Okay. And there are mechanisms, for example, by certain signaling molecules like quorum sensing, wherein they sense the density of the population, beyond which there will be programmed. This is called as programmed cell death. Beyond that particular critical density, a cell will start dying, or cells will start dying for the benefit of the other population. ठीक है? बट कोरम सेंसिंग इसमें बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. कभी अगर टाइम मिले तो तुम सर्च करना कि कोरम सेंसिंग कैसे इंपॉर्टेंट होता है, हाउ द सिग्नलिंग हेल्प्स द पॉपुलेशन सर्वाइव. Or there's always a critical limit. Otherwise, the nutrients are there's going to be very strong competition, and that will lead to death. So even competition is a means of population density.
Yes, ma'am.
ठीक है. I hope Dhwani understood कि cellular damage, toxics accumulate होंगे, cellular damage होगा, irreparable damage होगा, it cannot be a mortal cell. ठीक है? So this is what I meant. You don't use the term aging. You in fact say bacteria do not age, but then this is what I was referring to. Okay. Yeah. So I hope now it's clear as to what is a Seidel agent versus a static agent and a lytic agent. Now there are various control agents which are in use, and the choice of the agent to be applied is dependent on the specific application. In fact, in many cases, you will see that a combination of agents are used. They are broadly classified into physical agents, chemical agents, and mechanical agents. And you will see that the agents have different potency in controlling microorganisms. We'll talk about by potency. I mean to say, now you know the term sterilization and disinfection. So gases could be sterilizing agent. They could also be disinfecting agents. If you see the physical agents, mostly by physical agents, you can achieve sterilization, barring a couple of processes, and then even a mechanical process could either disinfect or sterilize. And now you are clear about what I mean by these terms. Representing examples of each methods before we close. Under mechanical methods, the mechanical removal, the method that is used is filtration, which can remove microbes from liquids as well as from air. The filters can be of two types. The first one is membrane filters, which perform separation by retaining particles larger than its pore size on the surface of the membrane. Typically, membrane filters that are used to remove bacteria have a pore size of 0.2 micron, which is much smaller than the average size of a bacterium. And these filters are used for removing bacteria from solutions or from media, especially where the components or one of the component is heat sensitive, such as antibiotic solutions or vitamin solutions. These are heat sensitive. So in such cases, if the media is composed of any of this, you would like to filter the media instead of going for sterilization by any other means. When the volume is to be filtered is small, you can even use such syringe filters. So here is the filter and you pass it through this filter. While vacuum filters are typically used for filtering large volumes. If filters with pore size smaller than microbial cells are used, you can understand that this is an effective means of sterilizing liquids. Yeah, that's one type of filter. Then another type of filter is actually depth filter, which is a matrix of randomly oriented fibers that capture particulates, in this case microbes, within the depth of the filter, unlike surface retention in the case of membrane filters. And one such depth filter that you will come across in the lab also is the high energy particulate air filter, which is the HEPA filter. This has an effective pore size of 0.3 micron, which is small enough to capture bacterial cells, even endospores and many viruses, as the air passes through these filters. So the air is actually sterilized. And HEPA filters, they have a variety of applications. You might have come across HEPA filters even in cars or in airplanes, even in home, in vacuum cleaners, in air conditioning systems, air purifiers, etc. They all have HEPA filters for sterilizing or controlling microorganisms. In laboratories, there are biological safety cabinets, which are good example of the use of HEPA filters. These filters, they remove microbes in the air, either entering the cabinet, that is the air intake, as well as that air which is leaving the cabinet, that is the air exhaust. And you can understand the importance of using it both for inlet air as well as the exhaust air. Inlet air ke liye it prevents environmental contaminants from entering this this workspace, while exhaust HEPA filter prevents experimental microbes from contaminating the laboratory. Safe in lab as well as in of the efficacy of filtration and the extent of protection offered by by these filters. There are these biological safety cabinets are of 4 levels called as biosafety levels, and each class is designed to provide a different level of protection both for the lab staff as well as the environment in the lab. Mostly you will see BSL-1 facilities which are used for minimal hazardous organisms which are reported to be not reported to be causing diseases, while BSL-2 is for those which are potentially hazardous to the cultures which are potentially moderately which are known to be moderately harmful or hazardous. So, for example, in my group, people work on BSL-2 because we are really not sure of what kind of organisms that we are handling when we are handling the environmental samples. While BSL-3 and 4 are for the actually pathogenic strains. So, for example, various viruses, even if you see SARS-CoV goes into BSL-3 and BSL-4 compared to the BSL-1 and 2. So a lot of protective gears are also used when working with BSL-4 and BSL-3 organisms. Yeah, that was about the mechanical agents. I think I'll stop here. If there are any questions, let me know, because we'll talk about physical and chemical agents in the next class. I guess we've just talked about. हाँ पूछो. Tell me.
Ma'am, BSL-2 I think I saw herpes or something.
Is it? हाँ, है, common viruses हैं. क्योंकि इसमें तो BSL-2 में क्या होता है ना, there is a very strong control of the exhaust air too. Okay, it is decontaminated and only or let's say sterilized and only then it's released outside. In fact, BSL-1 में कोई कंट्रोल नहीं होता है एग्जॉस्ट पे, तो आप उनके साथ ही सिर्फ वर्क करते हो जिसमें कि पैथोजेनिक बिल्कुल भी नहीं होते हैं. But BSL-2 में, of course, there are certain regulations, but here you don't really need to have those gears, the protective gears like you need for 3 and 4. गोपिका ठीक है?
Okay.
BSL-2 as the level itself says it is, और पता है कुछ उसमें भी strains होते हैं, मतलब I'm not really sure कि herpes के कौन से strains या क्या होंगे. herpes simplex है ये, ठीक है? So I need to check कि herpes simplex कितना pathogenic है. Okay.
All right.
है ना? और कोई किसी को question?
Ma'am, I wanted to ask about the lyoprotectants that we use in freeze drying. Ma'am, what exactly do the lyoprotectants do in that case?
तो lyoprotectants में तुम्हें पता है कि यहाँ पे you first freeze it and then you are subliming so that the water is drawn off, right? So they actually serve as a covering wherein the cell would have minimal impact, or the biomolecules will have minimal impact. Sucrose या कुछ जो है वो protect करेंगे आपके cell के content को भी, so that the ice crystals don't affect the cell integrity. ठीक है? Just like a cryoprotectant, a lyoprotectant also has similar क्या कहते हैं function. Have I been able to answer you?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, also one more doubt. मैम आपने बोला था कि फ्रीज ड्राइंग में हम 10 साल तक स्टोर कर सकते हैं बैक्टीरिया को, मतलब कल्चर को. तो मैम मतलब it's hard for me to just get it कि मतलब 10 साल तक without the with lack of water, how is the bacterial culture gonna survive?
It is just in an inactive state. It is so. In fact, when you all start the class, I'll show you. It's like a powdered form. You get it in these powdered forms. तो तभी मैंने कहा कि सिर्फ कुछ बैक्टीरिया हैं जिनको आप फ्रीज ड्राई कर सकते हो, सबको नहीं. They are sensitive. Okay. So it is not that every method that I showed you is going to be used for every kind of bacteria. Only those which are able to survive that. तो जब जब ये पाउडर्ड फॉर्म में होता है तो यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड कि ये कितना इजीली ट्रांसपोर्ट हो सकता है ना. तो ये अब ये ड्यूरेशन कि कितने दिन तक आप उसको स्टोर कर सकते हो ये भी डिपेंड करता है स्ट्रेन टू स्ट्रेन. It might vary, right? But I can show you strains when you're back in the lab. Whenever you start your practical components, I'll show you the form in which the cells are if you freeze dry them. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, then if there are no further questions, we will then stop the class and we'll meet tomorrow, students. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am.